Some of the most vulnerable kids in our schools are missing weeks of learning every year. They're suspended and sent home routinely due to disruptions caused by their disabilities. It's something their families and advocates call discrimination, and something our Nate Morabito has spent the last 6 months digging into. Nate, thank you for being with us again today.
Happy to discuss this. Such an important issue.
Yeah, so 6 months ago, you learned North Carolina suspends students with disabilities at length more than any other state. Let's start from the beginning. How did you find this out?
All right, so every year, every state has to report to the federal government what kind of discipline they use, right? And then the federal government, the Department of Education, compiles a report and shares it with Congress. And that report has a lot of data in it. And I'm a kind of a data nerd. And so we started looking at the most recent annual report to Congress and analyzed the data and found that the rate in which North Carolina was suspending these kids, I'm talking about long-term, not long-term suspensions, but cumulative days over a school year, more than 10 days collectively, was the worst in the country. And it kind of started us asking the question, why is this happening?
Exactly.
We know this isn't okay, and what can people do with it? And before you can get to that solution part, you have to understand the problem. And so that's what we did back in August, right before school started, really started to dig into, why is this happening to these children? You know, their parents are advocating for them, but they often feel unheard. And what are school districts doing to try and treat every individual student based on their individual need? And that's really what the law requires. Every student has a right to an education. It's guaranteed, in North Carolina especially. And it's all individualized. So if you don't treat the student for what that student needs, you tend to react, and you react by removing them from the classroom. And who suffers when that happens? Really everybody does.
Everybody, the family, the kids. So what exactly are school districts doing then?
So we know in recent years, school districts have tried to make this a priority. We know that, like in Rowan County schools, for example, which was the focus of our first story, they really have tried to look at the individual need of every student, look at that totality of that child, the child's history, so that you don't make a rash decision, that you don't make the wrong decision. And let's be honest, this is a very difficult job for a teacher. I mean, the teacher has this child and every other kid in the classroom, and you want to treat every one of those kids individually. You don't want that one child to disrupt the rest of the class, but you also don't want to remove that child from the class because then they won't get a proper education. And when they don't get an education, data show, they get into trouble, they go to jail. And so this is the time to start really focusing on it. And I'll tell you, CMS has done the same thing. They really are trying to focus on this. But what we found is this is just a systemic issue. This is kind of an across-the-board problem where there's a reliance on this reactive way of handling a child's behavior instead of proactively trying to figure it out. In North Carolina, for example, over several years, the number of teacher's assistants dropped because funding decreased. Just imagine one more teacher's assistant in a classroom, what kind of difference that could make for the one teacher that's there right now. You have another set of hands, another set of eyes and ears. And so schools are trying to figure this out. But what we wanted to know, because we know they're acting in good faith, they really are trying, they want to help these kids, but that doesn't seem to be working enough. So we started saying, well, who else should be paying attention to this problem?
Exactly. So WCNC Charlotte, we recently spoke with the U.S. Secretary of Education, of course, Miguel Cardona. What did he have to say about your investigation?
Well, here's what he said. This is a former teacher, former principal, and he knows, and you're going to hear from him in a second, he knows kind of what teachers and school districts are dealing with. And he also knows the federal government only has so much power in this because they don't fully fund education. They fund just a small portion of it. So he said that we're really trying to push states and local school districts to make this a priority. Here's more.
As a former school principal, I remember how challenging it was when students communicated that they have needs or deficits in skills through maladaptive behaviors. But it's our responsibility as educators to make sure that the students that need more education get more, not less. It's an issue that, if not addressed boldly, will lead to wider disparities.
So, Nate, what have other states done to protect these students?
This is something we've really focused on. You know, from a solutions perspective, who is doing this better? That's what we wanted to know. So we started looking at legislation in other states and found more than a dozen that have actually banned out-of-school suspensions, especially for like younger grade levels. And there are some exceptions, violence, if there's something that happens of a sexual nature, there's a bit of discretion there. But these other states have said, we are not going to take these kids, especially these young kids, out of the classroom like this. In North Carolina, we also know that sometimes suspensions are not coded as suspensions. Parents are called to pick up their kids early, which is effectively the same thing, or they're put on homebound care where they only get limited learning from home. So at least with these other places, we know the data shows a reduction in the number of suspensions when they do this. The question now is that part of the solution in North Carolina? And that's not really up for us to decide. That's for people who are in power and who have a lot more access to information than we have, that are living this daily.
Yeah, the General Assembly set to meet this spring. Do lawmakers say they plan to do anything about this?
So this is a short session coming up this year in North Carolina, which really means, based on the rules, if something's going to change, it's going to have to come out of committee. And there is an education reform committee, how fitting, that's meeting this year. And we talked to members of that committee. We've communicated with one of the co-chairs of that committee, who told us he very well could see this on an agenda at some point to discuss the whole issue of students with disabilities and exclusionary discipline. That is what that's called. But what it's really going to take is Republicans and Democrats working together. And we've talked to both sides. Both agree that this is a problem. And I think there will be some disagreement about what the solution is. But I think there's a real hunger to learn more about this. And as you'll hear, some people didn't even know this was an issue. Do you think North Carolina should ban this kind of discipline?
Unless it includes acts of violence against another, yes. They don't intend to be disruptive, but you're punishing them as if they did have intent. Therein lies the problem. You have to provide your school districts with alternative means to manage their schools and the students within them.
It's very important. I mean, these kids deserve to have a chance at education. We have issues that we have to address, and we're going to have to address them here. And it's going to have to be reoccurring money.
So you've spoken to many families over the last 6 months. What are they asking lawmakers to do?
Well, number one, they want them to listen to them, right? And I think in some of these circles, they're exhausted, these parents. They've spent years trying to fight battles for their kids with the school themselves. And in some ways don't really have the energy to even believe that lawmakers care about this, right? They want them to make this a priority, put it at the top of the agenda, learn more about it, and then take some action that keeps their kids in schools. And really what people can do in this situation is, if you have an opinion on this, you can reach out to your lawmaker, because right now they are listening. And as we know, it's not so much what they say, but what they do. And we'll be watching that. But the more people they hear from, the better they will be able to make a decision, and the right decision.
Yeah, so they can do some things from home. Families can.
Absolutely. But as I've said, they've been screaming this for years. And I think just being heard is a real strong first step. And they have advocates in the community that are trying to fight this fight for them too. And there are a lot of families. I'm talking about thousands of families that experience this. So this isn't like some super small percentage. This is quite a demographic. They just want to be heard, and they don't want lip service. They want actual action, because every day that goes by when their kid's not in a classroom, that kid is getting further and further behind.
For sure. All right, well, thank you for bringing it to light. It sounds like it's very timely, and hopefully lawmakers will do something about it. Thanks for joining us, Nate.
Thanks, Jane.
All right, so like we've been saying, Nate has been looking into this for the last 6 months. You can see his full investigation right now inside the WCNC Charlotte mobile app.